The human explorer moved slowly through the broken remains of the ancient city, his boots crunching softly over glass-like sand and shattered metal. This world had been abandoned for centuries, or so the galactic records claimed, yet the silence here felt unnatural, as if the planet itself was holding its breath. Towering ruins leaned at impossible angles, carved with alien symbols worn smooth by time and radiation. The human's visor scanned for life signs, threats, or energy traces, but the display showed nothing, no movement, no signals, no danger. Still, his instincts warned him not to relax. Humans had learned long ago that the most dangerous places were often the quietest. He was not here to make history or save lives. His mission was simple: survey, record, and leave. On worlds like this, interference was forbidden, especially when humans were already viewed with fear across much of the galaxy. As he passed through what once looked like a marketplace, a sound broke the silence. It was not an alarm, nor a weapon discharge. It was softer than the wind, fragile and uncertain. The human froze. His hand moved instinctively toward his sidearm, but he did not draw it. He listened again. There it was, a faint voice, trembling, almost swallowed by the ruins. Slowly, carefully, he turned toward the sound. From behind a collapsed wall stepped a small figure, barely reaching his waist. The child was alien, thin and pale, with large reflective eyes that carried exhaustion far beyond its age. Its clothes were torn, its hands shaking as it clutched something close to its chest. The human's heart tightened. Children were never supposed to be here. This planet was under restricted status, abandoned after internal purges by its own ruling species. Any survivor should have been impossible. The child looked up at the towering human, fear clear on its face. Humans were stories of terror in many alien cultures, creatures of war, destruction, and unstoppable violence. The child took a step back, then another, clearly ready to run. The human slowly lowered himself, placing his weapon on the ground to show he meant no harm. He said nothing. He knew words could frighten as much as weapons. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Dust drifted through the air like frozen time. Then, in a voice so quiet it barely carried, the child spoke. "Sir, can you bury my sister?" The words were broken, uneven, as if they had been repeated many times with no answer. The human felt the sentence strike deeper than any weapon ever could. In all his years exploring hostile worlds, nothing had prepared him for this. The child turned slightly, revealing what it had been holding, a small, lifeless form wrapped in faded cloth. The sister was younger, her features still and fragile, her body marked by signs of neglect rather than battle. This was not a casualty of war. This was abandonment. The human scanners immediately registered biological failure hours ago. Too late. Far too late. Around them, the ruins seemed to close in, heavy with the weight of forgotten crimes. The ruling species of this world believed weakness had no place in survival. The sick, the young, the slow, they were erased. Humans knew this history well. That was why they were ordered never to interfere. Helping would mean breaking galactic law. Staying would mean risk. Yet walking away now would mean something else entirely. The human looked from the small body to the child's eyes, filled not with anger, but with hope that should not exist here. The child did not ask for food or protection. It asked for dignity. For the dead to be treated as more than waste. The human's internal systems warned him of approaching patrol signals in the distance, automated drones still guarding a world that no longer cared. Time was running out. He could leave now and report nothing. That was the safe choice. That was the expected choice. But as he knelt there in the dust of an alien world, facing a request no record or rule had prepared him for, the human realized this mission had already changed. The galaxy would never know what happened here, unless he chose to act. And in that moment, as the child waited in silence among the ruins, the human made a decision that would echo far beyond this forgotten planet. The human remained still as the alien child waited in silence among the ruins. The wind moved gently through broken stone and old metal, but neither of them spoke. The human looked at the small, lifeless body wrapped in cloth, and then at the child who was standing with weak legs yet strong hope. The human had seen many worlds destroyed by war and greed, but this was different. This was quiet pain, the kind that leaves no ruins, marked by fire only. Memories left to fade. The child did not cry anymore. Maybe there were no tears left. The human slowly reached out, not touching the body, not yet, only showing that he was still there. The scanners in his suit warned him again about danger, patrol signals growing closer, rules flashing in his mind reminding him of orders and punishment, yet none of those warnings felt heavier than the silence of the child. The human understood something very clearly at that moment. If he walked away now, he would carry this silence forever. He carefully lifted the small body with respect, holding it as if it mattered, because to humans life always mattered, no matter how small or alien. The child followed closely, watching every movement, afraid that this human, like all others in stories, might suddenly change. The ruins around them showed signs of old executions, broken chains, marks on walls where others had begged before. These people had been erased because they were not strong enough. The human felt anger rise inside him, but he controlled it. Humans had learned that true strength was not shown by rage, but by choice. He stopped near a place where the ground was soft, covered by fine ash and sand. It was quiet, hidden from open skies. The child seemed confused, unsure why the human stopped here. The human gently placed the body down and began digging with his hands, ignoring the strain on his suit systems. He dug slowly, carefully, as if each movement was a promise that this moment would not be rushed. As the grave took shape, the child finally spoke again, asking in a small voice why the human was doing this. No alien had ever done this before. The human answered calmly, saying that among humans the dead are never left behind and that every life deserves rest, even if the galaxy forgets them. The words were simple, but they carried weight. The child listened closely, as if trying to understand a new truth, something never taught by their people. The human explained that humans believe remembering the weak is what keeps the strong from becoming monsters. The child looked down at the ground, then back at the sister, then nodded slowly. For the first time since they met, fear left the child's eyes, replaced by trust. The patrol signals were now close enough to be heard, faint mechanical sounds echoing through the ruins. But the human did not stop. He removed his helmet, exposing his face to the alien air, an act that broke every safety rule but showed respect. The child watched in shock. Humans never showed their faces to aliens, especially on forbidden worlds. When the grave was ready, the human carefully placed the sister inside and covered her with the cloth again. He said a few quiet words, not a prayer from any religion, just a promise that she would not be forgotten. The child knelt beside him, copying the motion. Even though their culture did not bury the dead, this moment was something new, something dangerous, something powerful. The ground was slowly covered until nothing remained but a simple mound. The human placed a small marker made from broken stone on top, not a name, just a sign that someone cared. The patrol sounds were now loud enough to shake the air. The child looked toward the noise, fear returning quickly. The human stood up, placing his helmet back on, and looked down at the child. He said it was time to hide, but he also said something else that the child would never forget. He said that no matter what happens today, this grave would matter because humans had seen it, and once humans witness something, they do not turn away. The child held on to those words as the shadows of approaching machines moved closer through the ruins, and the promise made in silence prepared to be tested. The alien patrol arrived without warning, tall armored figures stepping out of the shadows of the ruined city, their weapons glowing with controlled power. They moved with confidence because this world belonged to them. Even in death, the human stood between the child and the fresh grave, his posture calm, his hands empty. He did not raise a weapon, he did not run. The patrol commander stepped forward, its voice cold and sharp, demanding the human step away from the sight. The child trembled, hiding slightly behind the human leg, believing the stories that humans were dangerous, yet seeing now that this one refused to act like a monster. The human looked at the commander, and then at the grave. He answered in a steady voice, saying the burial was not finished, and he would not leave. The air felt heavy, as if the ruins themselves were listening. No alien had ever refused a direct order on this planet, and lived. The commander moved closer, scanning the grave with visible disgust, calling the dead weak, calling the act pointless. It said the body should have been left where it fell as an example. The human felt something burn inside him, not rage, but resolve. He replied that humans do not use the dead as lessons of fear. He said humans remember them instead. The words confused the patrol because this idea did not exist in their culture. To them, survival meant removing weakness completely. The human continued, Speaking slowly so the child could hear, he said that when humans bury the dead, they are not honoring weakness but protecting their own humanity. The child listened closely, holding on to every word as if learning a new way to exist. The patrol weapons began to rise, alarms sounding softly as orders were prepared. The human did something unexpected. He removed his gloves and placed his bare hands on the ground near the grave. This simple act showed surrender and defiance at the same time. He was vulnerable yet unmoving. The patrol commander hesitated. It had fought humans before. It knew humans were capable of violence beyond reason, yet this one stood unarmed, choosing stillness over survival. The silence stretched long enough to feel dangerous. The patrol demanded again that the human leave, warning him of execution. The human answered that he would accept the consequences, but the grave would remain untouched. He said some lines should never be crossed, even in war, even in law. The child felt tears return, not from fear but from something new, pride. Unknown to all of them, the human suit had already begun transmitting. The system recorded the encounter, automatically sending visuals and audio into the galactic network as a safety protocol. The words the human spoke were now spreading beyond this ruined city, watched by traders, soldiers, scholars, and civilians from many species. The image of a human standing unarmed before armed enforcers to protect an alien child shocked the galaxy. The patrol commander received an urgent signal, its stance shifting slightly as confusion replaced authority. It realized too late that this moment was no longer private. The world was watching. The commander lowered its weapon, just a fraction, not in mercy but uncertainty. It ordered the patrol to hold position. The human did not move. He remained beside the grave as the child stepped forward, standing openly now, no longer hiding. The child spoke softly, saying the human helped because it was right. The simple statement carried more power than any argument. The patrol had no response. They had never trained for this situation. The rules offer no guidance when strength refused to dominate weakness. The commander finally ordered a temporary withdrawal, claiming review authority. The patrol stepped back slowly, never turning their backs on the human. The threat remained, but the immediate danger passed. When the patrol disappeared into the ruins, the silence returned, heavier than before. The human exhaled slowly, knowing this was only the beginning. The child looked up, asking if the humans would be punished. The human answered honestly, saying maybe, but some things are worth the cost. He explained that humanity was not defined by laws or weapons but by choices made when no one expects kindness. The child nodded, holding on to that truth as if it were armor. In the distance, signals flared across the sky. More ships responding to the broadcast. The galaxy had seen something it could not forget, a human who refused to walk away, a grave that could not be erased, and a quiet act of defiance that would soon change how humanity was remembered forever. The ruins no longer felt empty after the patrol withdrew. The air was filled with unseen eyes and distant signals moving through space. The human stood quietly beside the grave, knowing the moment had already spread beyond this broken world. He could feel it in the way the child now stood taller, no longer hiding behind fear. The child looked at the human with a question that did not need words. The human understood that what happened next would decide everything, not only for them but for how humanity would be remembered. The human slowly turned his body so the recording system faced the open sky. He knew the broadcast was live now, reaching many species across the galaxy. Traders, soldiers, leaders, and ordinary beings were watching in silence, expecting violence, expecting threat. Instead, they saw a human kneel beside an alien grave. The human spoke calmly, explaining why he refused to leave. He said that power without mercy creates monsters, and that humanity learned this lesson through its own dark history. He said humans survived not because they were strongest but because they chose to protect those who could not protect themselves. His voice was steady, carrying weight, not anger. The child stepped closer, standing beside him. The child spoke about the sister, about how she was gentle and sick, and how their people left her behind. The child said no one came until the human did. The words were simple, but they cut deep across the galaxy. Reactions spread: confusion, disbelief, and something dangerous, hope. Many species had lived under systems that erased weakness. This moment forced them to question everything they accepted as normal. The human continued, saying that if helping a child was a crime, then humanity would accept that crime without regret. The alien commander returned, appearing on the edge of the ruins, now aware of the broadcast. Its authority was no longer absolute. The commander demanded the human stop speaking and ordered the transmission ended. The human refused, saying the truth did not need permission. He said the galaxy deserved to see what happens when laws forget compassion. The commander hesitated, struggling between duty and exposure. The human then made a choice that shocked everyone watching. He removed the insignia from his suit, placing it on the grave. This symbol represented his rank, his protection, his right to return home. By placing it there, he showed he was willing to lose everything for this moment. The child gasped, not fully understanding the meaning but sensing the weight. The human explained softly that humans believe some promises are greater than commands. He said this grave would stand even if he did not. The commander received multiple incoming signals, voices arguing, orders conflicting, authority breaking down. The commander realized this was no longer a simple enforcement mission, this was a turning point. The commander gave a new order to stand down completely, citing review by the council. The patrol retreated again, this time with uncertainty rather than control. Across the galaxy, debates erupted. Some called the human reckless, others called him brave. Many questioned their own systems. For the first time, news networks replayed the image of the human kneeling beside the grave again and again. Analysts tried to understand why a species known for war chose mercy instead. The answer unsettled them. Humanity did not see kindness as weakness, it saw it as strength. The child looked at the human, asking if this would save the sister. The human answered that it would not bring her back, but it would protect others like her in the future. The sky above the ruins glowed as distant ships altered course. Drawn by the broadcast, the human knew this story was no longer his to control. He had planted a truth that would grow whether anyone wanted it to or not. The child placed a small stone on the grave, copying the human earlier gesture, a symbol simple and powerful. The human stood beside the child, looking out at the ruins, no longer just ruins, but the birthplace of a legend. A choice had been made, and the galaxy would never return to what it was before. The ruins felt different now, as if the planet itself had awakened to witness what was happening. The human and the child stood near the grave while distant ships changed course across the sky, drawn not by weapons but by a story spreading faster than any signal before. The child felt the air vibrate with unseen movement, yet did not feel afraid anymore because the human was still there, standing calm and steady like a wall against the storm. The human knew the broadcast had reached places where decisions were made by beings who never touched the ground they ruled. He also knew that words once released could not be taken back. The child took a small step forward, then another, moving closer to the open space where the sky could see them clearly. The human looked down, surprised, but did not stop the child because some moments belong to those who must speak. The child raised a trembling voice and spoke not to the human but to the stars, saying that the sister was not weak, that she was kind, that she shared food and smiled even when she was sick. The child said weakness was not choosing to care, weakness was choosing to look away. The words were simple and untrained, yet they carried truth that no council speech ever could. Across the galaxy, millions paused to listen, some hearing their own buried memories awaken. Alien civilians watching from distant worlds began to react. Some remembered children lost to laws that demanded perfection, others remembered leaving family behind to survive. Systems built on fear began to crack under the weight of a single small voice. The ruling council of the alien species gathered in urgency, screens filled with the image of the child standing beside a human protector. Advisors argued about control, about image, about consequences, yet none could erase what had already been seen. The child continued speaking, saying the human did not ask what species they were or if they were allowed to help. He helped because someone asked. The human felt a tightness in his chest, knowing this moment was no longer about him. Humanity had become a mirror, forcing the galaxy to see itself clearly. On the ground, new patrols arrived but did not approach. They watched, uncertain, unsure how to respond to a situation where violence would only prove the human right. The commander from before stood among them, listening as new orders arrived, conflicting and confused. The authority that once felt absolute now felt fragile. The human spoke again, not loudly, not dramatically. He said humanity would not attack, would not conquer, would not demand change. He said humanity would simply remember and protect, and that sometimes that was enough. The child reached for the human hand, holding it without fear. This image spread everywhere. A human hand and an alien hand joined in quiet defiance. Far away, human ships received the broadcast and changed direction, not to fight but to witness, to stand ready if needed. Human leaders watched, knowing this moment would define them. They did not issue commands, they waited because humanity understood that some actions must remain personal to stay powerful. The child finished speaking and silence followed across worlds, the kind of silence that forces reflection. The council realized punishment would only deepen the wound. They realized the story could not be erased, only shaped. The commander on the ground received final instructions to stand down permanently and protect the site until further notice. The patrol lowered weapons, fully stepping back from the grave, acknowledging it for the first time as something sacred. The child looked up, asking quietly if the sister was heard. The human answered yes, and more than that, she was remembered. The child smiled for the first time, not a full smile, but enough the sky above glowed as ships settled into orbit, not as threats but as witnesses. The ruins were no longer forgotten. They had become a place of beginning, a place where a small voice challenged the universe and a human chose to listen, and somewhere among the stars the idea of humanity changed forever. The sky above the ruins changed slowly as human ships arrived one by one, not in attack formation, not with weapons charged, but with lights dimmed and engines calm. They came silently, as if entering a place of mourning rather than a battlefield. The alien patrol watched in confusion because no invasion signal followed, no threat display appeared. The human on the ground felt the presence of his people before he saw them, and for the first time since landing he allowed himself to breathe easier. The child looked up in wonder, asking if more humans were coming. The human answered yes, and they were coming to stand, not to fight. The ships held position, forming a wide protective circle around the ruins, not crossing any borders, not breaking any law, yet making their message clear: the grave would not be touched. The alien commanders received new data streams, human ships transmitting open signals of peace, offering shared observation access rather than control. This was unexpected because war doctrine taught that strength must always be shown loudly. Humanity chose the opposite. The ruling council argued against, some demanding force, others urging caution. The image of the child holding the human hand still played across their screens, reminding them that any aggressive move would be seen by the entire galaxy. The ground patrols slowly stepped back, allowing distance between themselves and the grave. They were trained to dominate, not to protect, yet now they were ordered to do exactly that. The human knelt beside the child, explaining that humans once learned the cost of silence. He spoke of ancient human mistakes when cruelty was allowed to hide behind law. He said humanity survived by remembering those failures and choosing differently. The child listened carefully, absorbing each word as if it were a lesson meant to be passed on. The child asked why humans cared about strangers. The human replied that strangers were only people not yet known. This idea settled deeply inside the child, changing something that could never return to what it was before. Across the galaxy, reactions continued to grow. Some systems demanded reform, others feared unrest. Inspired groups gathered quietly, speaking of dignity and choice, using the human act as proof that another path existed. Human leaders addressed the galaxy not with threats, but with a simple statement. They said humans would defend the right of the weak to be treated with respect. Everywhere they stood, they made no demands, but they did not apologize either. This clarity unsettled those who relied on fear to rule. The human ships remained still, their presence steady and calm, like guardians rather than conquerors. On the ground, the alien commander approached again, this time without weapon raised. The commander spoke differently, acknowledging the burial and recognizing the site as protected under emergency cultural review. This had never happened before. The child watched closely, realizing this moment meant a sister death would not be forgotten. The human thanked the commander not as a superior but as an equal. The commander struggled with this gesture, yet accepted it. The ground shifted, not physically but in meaning. The ruins were no longer symbols of erased lives, they became proof that change could begin anywhere. The child asked what would happen next. The human answered honestly, saying change was slow and often painful, but it had already started. He said the galaxy now knew humans would stand for those who could not stand alone. The child nodded, holding that truth tightly. The human ships remained through the cycle, lights glowing softly in respect. The stars above watched silently as a new idea took root, not that humans were strongest, but that when it mattered most they chose to protect rather than destroy. And that choice echoed farther than any weapon ever could. The dawn arrived softly over the ruins, casting long shadows across stone and sand, and for the first time in generations the world did not feel abandoned. The human stood beside the child as the light touched the small grave, and the air felt calm, not silent but peaceful. The ships in the sky remained still, watching, not guarding with force but with presence. The alien patrols kept their distance, no longer ordered by fear but by reflection. The child knelt near the grave, placing both hands on the ground, feeling the warmth of the rising sun and whispering words meant only for the sister. The human remained quiet, allowing the moment to belong to the child, because some endings must be gentle. The ruins around them no longer felt like a place of punishment, but a place where something new had been born. Across the galaxy, the story continued to spread, not as a warning but as a lesson. Councils met, laws were questioned, and for the first time weakness was discussed, not as failure but as responsibility. The image of the grave, simple and unmarked, became a symbol shared across networks, reminding civilizations that power could protect instead of erase. The ruling species of the world issued a declaration recognizing the site as sacred ground and granting protection to any who sought refuge there. This Decision shocked many, but it could not be undone because the galaxy had already accepted it. The child was no longer alone because the sister memory had become a voice heard everywhere. The human received messages from his people, not orders but acknowledgement. They told him that what he had done would be remembered not as disobedience but as the reason humanity would be trusted again. The human felt no pride, only relief. He had not come to change the galaxy, but sometimes the smallest acts carry the largest echoes. The child looked up, asking what happens now. The human answered that now they live and remember and teach others to choose better paths. The child smiled fully this time, a smile built from safety and hope rather than survival. Visitors began to arrive slowly, not soldiers, not rulers, but ordinary beings from many species. They came quietly, standing near the grave, placing small tokens of respect, stones, fabric, symbols of their own lost ones. No words were needed. The grave had become a place where grief was allowed and dignity restored. The child watched these visitors with wonder, realizing the sister had become part of something greater. The humans stood nearby, offering guidance when needed, but mostly allowing the moment to belong to the galaxy. As time passed, the ruins were no longer called ruins. They became known as the resting ground, a place where the weak were honored and the strong were reminded of responsibility. The child chose to stay, becoming a caretaker of the site, learning from the human and others who came. The human eventually prepared to leave, knowing his role was complete. Before departing, he knelt one last time beside the grave, placing his hand on the stone marker. He promised not to forget, and he knew humanity would keep that promise. When the human ship lifted gently into the sky, the child watched without fear. The stars no longer felt distant or cruel, they felt connected. The story of a simple burial and a quiet choice became legend, not because of violence but because of compassion, and in that legend the galaxy learned a truth that could never be erased, that humanity's greatest strength was not how hard it could fight, but how firmly it could stand for those who could not stand alone.